Hello and welcome once again to this video. So today I'm going to be talking about how to install open source config sync. In my last video, I did talk about what config sync is. So if you do not know what config sync is, to give you a recap, config sync is the tool that allows you to synchronize Kubernetes configurations and security policies across a single or multiple clusters from a single Git repository. Okay, and this was the repository we used in the last video, and I did show how to set that up on GKE. So if you need to understand a bit more about config sync and how to set that up in particular on Google Cloud, you can go check out this video which goes into details on how to set that up. However, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to install the open source version of config sync, because not everyone uses GCP, so not everyone's going to have access to the Google Cloud environment to install config sync automatically. Okay, so in this video we're going to be installing OSS config sync, and that is the config sync available from this repository. I'm going to leave a link to this in the description so you can check it out. So this is what we're going to be installing. Now in this demo I'm going to be using a local K3D cluster, or if you're using Minikube or whichever kind of cluster you have going locally, that should work perfectly as well. So here I have K3D installed, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a new cluster. You can see I don't have any clusters running right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and create a new cluster for this demo. Cluster create, I'm going to call this demo cluster, and I'm going to set it up with 3 nodes. Now that's creating my cluster. I'm just going to wait for that cluster to get ready, and once that cluster is ready, we can go ahead and install config sync. Now the first thing we need to do to install config sync is to get the version that we want to install. And in this case, I want to install the latest version of config sync that's available. So I'm just going to head over to the releases page for config sync. And right here, you can see it, but if I head over to the release page, you can see we have version 1.15 as the latest. So I'm just going to copy that. Okay. I'll head back into my terminal. My cluster is still creating and almost ready, and my cluster is ready. So if I do K3D cluster list now, I can see my cluster is running with 3 nodes. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is set the version that I want to install, and I'm just going to do export config sync version and set that in there. Now this is the version I copied from the release page of config sync. I'm going to paste that in there because that's the version I want to have installed. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I'll just go into my installation directory for config sync here, OSS, because that's the repo I want to be working from. Now the next thing I want to do is to download the latest version of config sync. That version I just set in my environment variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use the wget or curl. If you have curl or whatever tool you have, you can go ahead and download the latest version of the config sync manifest. That's all I'm doing here. So I'm grabbing from the releases page or releases repo for config sync, and you can see here we're doing a replace for that version that I want to grab, and I'm grabbing the config sync manifest, the YAML file. That should go ahead and download that config sync manifest file for me locally. And now I have this config sync manifest, the YAML file. Now let's take a look at that config sync manifest file really quickly. Okay, so in here in my directory, this is where I downloaded the file to. You can see we have this manifest file in here, which has the config management monitoring namespace, the config management system. Now, if you did see when we installed config sync on GKE, these are the exact set of resources that were installed for us. So we're still having the same process here, where we have the config namespace is set up, and then it installs the custom resource definitions that set up config sync for us. And everything here looks nice and good. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply that to my cluster using kubectl apply f, and I'm going to pass in that file that we just downloaded. Okay, now that's running, so that should go ahead and create all these resources, or namespace, some custom resource definitions, a service account, back roles, and all of that. And it also does set up OTel. So OTel is Open Telemetry Collector, the agent, and all of that. That's what's installed in the config management monitoring namespace for config sync. And that's what's used to measure or collect metrics about config sync in itself. So that's getting installed. We can see the status of that using the kubectl get all single person, the config management system namespace. And let's see. Okay, so our resources are running. We have the reconciler manager running already. The deployment, the replica set, everything looks fine and good. And we can take a look as well at the config management monitoring namespace, just to be sure we have everything going. So this is monitoring, and we have the hotel collector set up as well, and everything seems to be running. Okay, awesome. So the next thing we want to do after having that ready is going to be to install our root sync. Now, if you've forgotten what the root sync resource is, the root sync is the resource that synchronizes our cluster to Git repository. Okay, if you remember when we installed config sync automatically using GKE automatically, or Anthos config management automatically sets up the root sync for us. Now, in this case, where we're installing open source config sync manually, we have to install a root sync resource. This root sync resource is how we tell our cluster, or how we tell config sync which repository we want to synchronize to a cluster. So here I'm creating a root sync resource using the custom resource. So we're saying create a root sync resource for us. I'm calling it root sync, and I'm installing it in the config management system namespace. Source type git. Okay, source format I'm using unstructured, but remember this can be unstructured or hierarchical. But I'm using unstructured here because it gives me the flexibility to structure things how I want, and is also the recommended source format by Google. Here I'm configuring my Git repository just like we did in the previous video. Repo, I want to point it to this repository. Now this repository is the same repository we used on the previous setup, and that's this repository in here. You can see I have a policies/GKE folder in here, and I have a base in here. Okay, now I want to synchronize the resources that I have in here. My base, which just contains an external secret and an external secret operator, and some network policy resources that just allows ingress and egress traffic. Okay, so that's all this is. If you don't know what external secrets is, you don't have to worry about it for this video. It's just an operator that allows you to synchronize secrets from third-party clouds into your Kubernetes clusters. Now, in this case, just assume I want to have that across all my clusters that I have, or a single cluster in this case, since we install it manually. Okay, so with that ready, now I can go ahead and apply my root sync resource to the cluster. So that creates our connection between our repository and our cluster. Now, something else I haven't mentioned is here you can see I'm pointing it to the main branch. So that means I want to synchronize from the main branch. And the dir here, policies/gk/base, like I just mentioned, for synchronizing resources from this directory. Auth is set to none because I'm not using any authentication to connect to GitHub. I want to use my repository is public. Okay, that's why I'm using the public repository here, so I don't need any additional access tokens configured from GitHub. But if you're using the private repository, then you can go ahead and set up your access token for GitHub here and all of that. And here I'm saying no SSL verify. I don't need any additional SSL verifications and all of that, just basic stuff. Okay, so with all of this ready, I can go ahead and apply that to my cluster. Kubectl apply F, and I'm gonna call this root sync. Okay, so it says root sync configured. Let's take a look at that. Kubectl get pods, and let's check the namespace config management system. That's where we installed it. Okay, awesome. We can see our root reconciler is getting created. I'm just gonna throw in a watch in there just to see when it's fully created. Creating about 4 replicas in there, so let's just wait for that because it might take a minute. Okay, so we're just gonna wait for that to get set up, and while that's getting set up, we're just gonna take a look at what we're synchronizing. In here, you can see we just have the external secrets resource and the network. Now, what this external secret resource is just it sets up a namespace for us called external secret, and then it installs the external secret chart in that namespace. So if this synchronization works correctly, I should have a new namespace called external secret, and we should have the external secret resources installed for me in that namespace. Okay, so let's take a look again. Okay, root sync reconciler seems to be working. Now we have 4/4, which is what we expect. Now let's take a look at what's happening. We're just gonna check what namespaces we have. Or let's take a look at that resource again. It's running, so let's just take a look at the resource. Just gonna copy that, and we're gonna do kubectl describe that resource config management system. Okay, here we can see that resource, everything started correctly. But what I'm interested in is the status of this reconciler right now. Okay, so we can see state is running, ready is true, and over here we can see a bit more information about it. We can see the hotel agent, or what I'm looking for in particular. Okay, here we can see our git sync repository pointing to that root sync resource that we just created, okay, which is awesome. Now let's confirm that everything is working. We can check what namespaces we have. Awesome, we have an external secret namespace created for us here already. Okay, now let's take a look at what's in that. External secrets, and boom, we have our resources in here. Okay, you can see we already have one external secret running, and these resources are all getting created. So our synchronization is working, and this is just awesome. Okay, and we can confirm that these are the resources we have by going back to a repository. In here you can see external secrets, and that's all we have. So our synchronization seems to be working perfectly. Something else we can do as well is to make a change to our repository, like push some new code to our config sync policies directory and see if that picks up and gets synchronized immediately. Okay, here you can see all our external secrets resources are running correctly. So this just means everything is working as we expected. Okay, now let's make a change just to test this. We're gonna make a change to our config sync repository here. Remember, here we just installed these two resources, but I'm gonna add an external resource here, which is nginx. So I want to add an nginx component to this base customization file in here for the resources that I want synchronized. If you want to know what that component is, it's right here. It's just an nginx deployment. Okay, it deploys nginx to an nginx namespace, and here we're creating a namespace, and that's all that is, just a namespace and an nginx deployment. Now I'm adding that in here, so I want this nginx resource created for me as well. Ideally, you may not want to be creating like resources like nginx using this, but you can use it as well. It's not just for policies and configurations. You can use it to deploy manifest files as well, which is amazing. So here I'm just gonna add that in here and make a commit, and I don't want to commit this manifest file here for config sync. Oh, actually we can commit it, we can add it in there. So add, and we're gonna do git as well to the policies directory, and that's the commit. Okay, I'm just gonna call this fix, or let's call this a feature, or for example, add in nginx deployment to policies. Now you can call this whatever you want. Okay, so origin main. Now I'm pushing this code. Okay, that's pushed. If we go back to our repository in here, we check that's the wrong file, and we check the customization file in. Okay, we should see we have our component nginx. Now remember that config sync synchronization works every 15 seconds by default. Okay, and we can confirm that if I go right into the config reconciler resource and I scroll all the way, you'll be able to see the default. It's in here somewhere. Okay, git sync wait, you can see it's 15 seconds right now. We can customize this, but 15 seconds works perfectly for me. Now let's take a look at what's happening. Get namespace again, And you can see we already have our Nginx resource in here. Nginx namespace is already in here. Okay, so the synchronization is already working. Okay, and we have our Nginx deployments here already running. Perfect. So that means this is constantly watching our Git repository and synchronizing those changes as soon as they're made, or every 15 seconds, depending on how we customize it. So that's how you set up config sync using open source config sync. This is very flexible and it helps you manage configurations and policies across multiple clusters. Since this is the local demo, I don't want to run multiple clusters locally. That's why I'm just using one cluster, but you can use the same step to synchronize across multiple clusters as well. And that's it for this video. If you have any comments, leave likes and leave your comments below the video. I'll try to get to them and address them as soon as possible. That's it for now. Have a good one. I'll see you guys. So thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss future contents like this. Thank you.